I can feel something big pressing against the surface of American life, the kind of pressure that signals a historic crossroads rather than a passing swell. When thresholds like this appear, paths don't branch gently, they lock in. The headline isn't only disruption, it's the convergence of technology, capital, and governance hitting scale at the same time. The deeper system is shifting, computing power compounding faster than institutional adaptation, finance chasing narrative heat, policy lagging distribution, culture learning in public at machine speed. Where power centralizes, legitimacy thins. Where capacity expands, adoption stutters. Where innovation outruns trust, the gap becomes the risk. It has happened before. When electrification met assembly lines, entire sectors reorganized not because factories got brighter, but because networks rewired incentives and costs. The stakes are human and strategic. Households living on tight margins absorb volatility first. Small firms face platform rules they didn't vote for. Incumbents look strong until dependence on brittle pipes turns that strength into fragility. At this level of strain, change is unavoidable. Only the direction is open toward deliberate reinvention that compounds resilience, or toward a deeper fracture that compounds fragility. Next, the mechanisms, near-term triggers and timelines, and how costs and benefits will actually distribute. Week of September 29th, 2025, we ran today's stack through a deployment architecture stress test. Do our evaluations actually cover the new reasoning patterns? Are the safety mitigations holding under load? Are we still inside our latency and unit cost targets? And where are compute and energy the true bottlenecks? On context, I keep one public anchor in view. BEA's National Income and Product Accounts, Table 1.1.5, show personal consumption near two-thirds of GDP, a reminder that usefulness at consumer and prosumer edges is not a sideshow, it's the market. My thesis is simple. The capability safety cost frontier has shifted enough that we can ship more automation into everyday workflows without raising systemic risk, but only if we treat reliability, energy, and governance as first-class features. I'll sketch how we got here, what constraints still bite, and which options are real. The basic argument is that execution wins now, not headlines. Here is why. Models are good enough to pass narrow tasks, but the pipeline around them, evals, safeguards, caching, scheduling, support, decides whether they help real users at sane cost. I don't need elegance, I need reliability curves that stay flat when traffic spikes and a safety posture that refuses to drift as we scale. I'm using the iterative software eras as the through line. In mainframes, we centralized scarcity. In client-server, we pushed work outward. On the web, we treated release, learn, improve as a loop. In cloud, we automated the loop. AI deployment inherits that cadence. Ship small. Instrument everything. Trim latency. Watch error shapes, not averages. Improve the loop itself. The capability lift is obvious. The discipline of the loop determines who holds trust. Two mechanisms set our bias this week: latency and unit economics, safety mitigations and governance. Latency is total time from user intent to confirmed result. Unit economics are dollars per successful task after caches, retries, and human fallback. Safety mitigations are the guardrails that prevent harm or policy violation. Governance is the accountability layer, who can change what, with logs. These sound abstract until you put them in product vignettes under load. A finance back-office testbed leaned on an assistant that classifies expenses, drafts vendor emails, and fills a ledger stub. Cold path was 1.9, 2.3 seconds median. Warmed path with a 24-hour cache and a small function calling plan came in under 800 miss. Unit cost fell by half because we stopped regenerating deterministic scaffolding. We found a safety gap. The assistant occasionally proposed an email that overstated certainty about a missing receipt. Evaluations caught it because we run a reference prompt suite with seeded edge cases. The mitigation was a calibrated uncertainty phrase plus an inline request for proof step. Reliability stabilized without sacrificing speed. A small manufacturing line used an anomaly triage agent that reads logs, photos, and operator notes to suggest one of 5 interventions. It launched at 93-95% agreement with the human shift lead on Evals. That's not enough. At 5-7% disagreement, the plant doesn't sleep. We put a simple governance lever in place. When confidence falls below a threshold, the agent is read only, and an escalation goes to the lead with traceable model reasoning plus citations to the last 10 similar incidents. The shift lead's override rate dropped by a third after a week because the explanations improved and the thresholds were tuned to the real distribution, not the ideal one. A local clinic piloted a scheduling and prep assistant that drafts appointment reminders with personalized prep checklists. Baseline latency was fine, but the real risk was overreach, suggesting prep steps that should stay physician-authored. We constrained the assistant to a closed checklist drawn from an internal SOP file and logged all template changes with approvals. Safety held because the agent couldn't invent new prep. It could only assemble, translate, and time. The win wasn't magic, it was governance, clear scope, immutable sources, and logs. Human impact matters. A teacher trying to plan a week of lessons needs the assistant to be on time, not clever. A dispatcher in a trucking firm needs a route summary that arrives before the driver leaves, not a perfect paragraph. A single parent juggling 2 jobs needs the bill pay agent to never auto-send an uncertain payment. Access is reliability plus price. If we keep latency under a second on warmed paths, keep unit cost under 1/10 of the cost of manual execution, and prevent safety drift, we create time where time is scarce. Receipts first. A public benchmark table tells you models are stronger on reasoning and summarization, but the gap between scoreboards and production shows up in our reliability dashboards. Another public anchor, the long-term outlook from a nonpartisan budget office projects federal debt held by the public above 100% of GDP in coming decades. Summary figure, first pages. It's not a moral point, it's a constraint on future subsidies and energy build-outs. And on energy, a recent electricity statistics release shows utility-scale solar and wind taking a rising share of generation, monthly tables near the front. That's a capital and scheduling fact for inference workloads. Green windows are widening, but they're not infinite. Align batch jobs with supply or pay more. The contrarian line is that our biggest risk is not runaway models, it's silent safety drift under product pressure. People assume governance is a legal afterthought. In practice, it's a performance feature. We tested it against the record by forcing all prompt and policy changes through a change control log with human approvals and automated diff checks. Incident rates fell because we removed untracked tweaks that had stacked into unpredictable behavior. The implication is simple. You can buy accelerators. You can't buy trust. There are options. 1, push raw capability and accept higher costs and risk. 2, throttle to safety and lose product fit. 3, re-architect for execution dominance. Win each iteration as constraints tighten. We choose the third. That means prizing warm start paths, structured tool use, and aggressive caching of safe subplans. It means shipping with narrow scopes, then widening with telemetry. It means rate limits and burst budgets tied to real energy availability. 2 pragmatic recommendations follow. For the product team, put a budget gate on every new feature. Declare the target P50 latency and unit cost. Show the worst case underburst, and prove the safety boundary with a named eval suite and a post-deploy monitor. If you can't meet the gate in 2 weeks, cut scope or change the plan. For the platform team, move cold path generation of predictable scaffolds to a daily job scheduled in energy-friendly windows. Store results and assign cache with expiry and provenance hashes. Do it in the next sprint, not next quarter. Both are utility moves, not slogans. I test claims against documents because it keeps us grounded. A reliability dashboard that shows a flat P95 during a traffic spike is a stronger proof than any slide. A capability eval sheet with red team failure categories that shrink week over week is a plan, not a wish. A simple paragraph number in a standards text that defines residual risk is a better anchor than 1,000 tweets. When I name Table 1 or Paragraph 23, I'm giving us something we can check tomorrow. Execution dominance is not about speed alone. It's about compounding reliability so that developers and users trust the platform enough to build on it. Trust drives ecosystem leverage, distribution, developer confidence, data network effects, and support bandwidth. If we keep our promises on latency and safety, third-party builders spend their time shipping features, not chasing edge bugs. That's how we bend unit economics down and widen access. Bottom line, capability lift is real, but value accrues to teams that make reliability, safety, and cost visible and enforceable. I won't moralize about the broader politics here. I'll just say incentives shape behavior. If we pay for warm, safe paths and deny budget to cold, risky ones, we will get more of the former. If we log and review changes, we will see and fix drift. If we align batch with energy and keep interactive paths slim, we will scale within our means. We are at a crossroads, but the choice inside the product is not abstract. Either we ship discipline or we ship noise. I choose discipline because it compounds. Next, we tighten safety coverage and post-deploy monitors, then squeeze latency and unit cost again without cutting refusal integrity. The risk isn't loud explosions, it's quiet drift. The slow widening of loopholes as traffic rises, prompts mutate, and teams nudge configs to meet deadlines. Drift compounds. It shows up as a 1 in 1,000 miss that becomes 1 in 100 when a campaign lands. I'm switching the through line to safety practice evolution. Software began with unit tests, then integration suites, then canaries, then full telemetry and SRE. AI deployment needs the same maturation curve, pre-release evals, structured red teaming, progressive rollout, and continuous post-deploy monitoring that treats safety as a live metric, not a promise. The basic argument is that our pre-deploy coverage is rarely the failure point. The gap is after launch when real user behavior collides with edge distributions. Here is why. Models learn non-linearly, users probe creatively, and product incentives pull toward speed. Only a post-deploy loop with budgeted time and compute can hold the line. Two mechanisms dominate this phase: capability eval coverage with red team findings, and post-deploy feedback loops wired to governance levers. Eval coverage means mapping tasks to measurable tests with pass-fail thresholds and known blind spots. A red team finding is a documented failure mode with steps to reproduce and a proposed mitigation. Post-deploy loops mean monitors that sample real traffic, classify risk, and trigger actions, throttle, escalate, or refuse. Governance levers are the human approvals and logs that make these actions accountable. A consumer productivity app gave us the first lesson. We launched a writing assistant with strict refusal policies around sensitive topics, verified on a pre-release eval sheet that included 2,000 seeded prompts. It passed. In the wild, users composed multi-turn drafts that gradually crossed lines without a single bad turn. The failure wasn't in the policy, it was in the temporal logic. Our checks were per turn, not per session. We added a rolling context classifier that evaluates a sliding window of intent and content. The red team reproduced the drift with a 7-step script. Post-deploy monitors caught and refused it within weeks. Latency impact was 60-90 ms on warmed paths, acceptable trade for integrity. An enterprise data summarizer for operations reports taught a second lesson. The model summarized logs and emails into a daily brief. It was right most of the time, but when wrong, it compressed uncertainty into false certainty. The eval suite flagged overconfident summaries, but the fix didn't stick until we tied mitigation to an instrument, a confidence-calibrated template that forces the model to mark sources and to separate observed from inferred. We named this source mode summarization, and a post-deploy monitor scanned outputs for unlabeled inferences. When the rate ticked up after a schema change, the monitor throttled the new schema to 20% of traffic and paged the owner. Drift met friction and stopped. A healthcare intake pilot, tightly scoped to logistics, provided the third case. The assistant could schedule visits and send preparation reminders, but we constrained it to internal SOP documents only. Pre-deploy evals on document adherence were strong. Post-deploy, we saw a rare but concerning pattern. When a document link 400 forward for a brief window, the assistant hallucinated a plausible substitute instruction. We added a hard dependency. If the source retrieval confidence dropped below a threshold, the assistant must either quote the last validated version or route to a human with an inline document unavailable banner. The monitor checked retrieval confidence per call. The 404 window returned weeks later. This time the system degraded safely. Receipts ground the posture. A standards text defines the frame for risk management. I keep the NIST AI risk management framework open, especially section 2.3 on measurement and monitoring, clear about iterative context-specific measurement. In another reference point, an international guidance on AI risk, ISO IEC 23894-2023, Clause 6, lays out lifecycle risk treatment, naming post-deployment as a distinct phase. And on operational readiness, a service control catalog like SOC2 uses change management and monitoring controls, e.g., CC8 style change criteria and CC7 incident response, that we can map to model and policy changes. I cite these not as slogans, but as guardrails we can test against. Do we actually have measurement, lifecycle treatment, and change control for our prompts, tools, and refusal rules? The human impact lens stays simple. A call center agent juggling 3 chats needs the model to decline gracefully rather than guess. A small nonprofit needs translated outreach that never invents eligibility rules. A freight dispatcher wants anomaly summaries that say insufficient data rather than a confident fiction. Reliability is dignity. Tell the truth about uncertainty, refuse where needed, and never make the user clean up our mess under time pressure. I keep a contrarian line in view. Tightening safety does not inevitably worsen unit economics if we put the guardrails in the right place. We tested this by moving expensive generative checks out of the hot path. The monitor runs on compact classifiers trained to spot classes of risk in under 5 mounds. Only when a risk score crosses a threshold do we invoke heavier tools. A small cache of safe plans, pre-validated tool call skeletons with typed arguments, replaces freeform planning on repeat tasks. A public lesson here matches what operations books have long shown. Queuing and tiered routing beat brute force. The implication is practical. A safer system can also be cheaper if we do less work on the average request. 2 recommendations follow, aimed at utility. For product owners, require safety budgets alongside latency and cost targets. Define the maximum acceptable residual risk on 3 named evals, wire a monitor to each, and commit to spending compute to hold that line. Put it in this quarter's goals and review weekly. For platform teams, implement policy as code with change approvals and assign diff log. Tie rollout to progressive percentages with auto rollback based on a numeric safety KPI. Do it in 2 sprints. These moves add friction only where it pays back in trust. A note on evaluations. We widen coverage by mixing synthetic adversarial prompts with sampled real traffic, then score failures by severity and frequency. The eval sheet names the artifact, the threshold, and the owner. When a failure appears in production, we don't argue. We write a reproducer, add it to the suite, and refuse to ship until it passes. The loop is the product. If the loop is weak, the product is weak no matter how strong the base model is. Governance matters when time compresses. The worst days are incident days, when internal chat lights up and customers ask for explanations. We earn credibility by showing the chain, the policy version, the prompt diff, the tool config, the monitor alert with timestamp, the throttle action, the fix. If we cannot produce that chain within an hour, we are not governed. We are hoping. Hope is not an instrument. I also watch energy as a constraint on monitoring growth. As traffic rises, we cannot multiply monitors linearly. We compress features, distill classifiers, and schedule heavy re-evals in low-price energy windows. When interactive paths do need heavier checks, like image segmentation for safety, the rules are simple. Cap the chain length, pre-compile models, and borrow from caches. The point is not austerity. It's making safety sustainable at scale. Bottom line for this part: safety that scales is an engineering practice, not a press line. Pre-deploy suites start the story, post-deploy monitors, change control, and progressive rollout finish it. If we hold those lines, we can keep shipping features that matter without eroding trust. If we relax them, drift will do what drift always does: spread quietly until the wrong day reveals it. We move now to tighten coverage again, cut cost without cutting refusals, and harden the loop under load. Pressure stays on. The next iteration needs to ship cleaner and faster. We push structured tool use, pre-validated plans, and cache discipline to bend latency and unit costs while preserving safety. The fear I'm watching is quiet cost creep. Every uncatched template, every freeform plan, every cold path that slips back in under deadline pressure will eat margin and push us to cut corners where we shouldn't. I'm shifting the through line to platform shifts and distribution. Each wave redefines where logic lives and how work flows. PC put power at the edge. Web centralized state and made updates cheap. Mobile compressed attention into seconds. Agents will braid tools, data, and policy in live loops. The basic argument is that the agent era only works if we industrialize planning and caching. Here is why. Freeform reasoning is expensive and variable. Typed plans with stable tool calls are cheap and reliable. Distribution rewards the second because it compounds. Two mechanisms carry the weight here: latency, throughput, unit economics, and distribution productization. Latency is time to first useful token and time to confirmed action. Throughput is tasks per accelerator hour. Unit economics are total dollars per successful task after caches, retries, and human fallback. Distribution and productization mean onboarding friction, trust at first refusal, and support bandwidth when things go wrong. When we wire these to structured tool use, we stop doing bespoke work on repeat tasks, and we stop guessing under time pressure. A support triage assistant gave us the first clean win. Before, it read tickets and brainstormed next steps. After, it chose from a registry of pre-validated plans, collect missing logs, verify entitlement, offer guided reset, each with typed arguments and guardrails. Cold path dropped from 2.6 seconds to 1.4. Warmed path from 1.1 to 450 milliliters. Unit cost fell because the model didn't have to rederive the shape of the task. A post-deploy monitor watched for out-of-registry actions and required a human review when the assistant tried something novel. Users saw fewer strange moves and got faster answers. Support load fell, not because the model got smarter, but because the system stopped asking it to improvise. A logistics pricing tool showed the second pattern. The agent used to synthesize quotes from scratch, surfing a rate card database and applying rules. It worked, but it was fragile under schema changes. We inverted the flow. The agent now calls a version pricing microservice and only fills in narrative fields, attaching a provenance bundle that includes the rate card version and the rule set hash. Caching lives at two levels: a day-long cache for rate card lookups and a 5-minute cache for popular routes. Latency became stable. When the underlying rate table updated, we rolled over caches by key space and avoided nasty half-old quotes. The provider who integrated this spent less time on reconciliation and more time on coverage. A compliance document generator made the third case. The agent assembles a standard report from a clause library and a small amount of client-specific data. We used to let the model draft clauses and then lint them. Failures were rare but costly. We flipped it to assemble only from an immutable clause library, with a change control log for any library edit. The only generative step is natural language glue text between clauses, and even that is checked against a structure validator. The latency budget shifted from seconds to sub-second and unit cost halved. Most importantly, the system could refuse questionable requests cleanly because the library scope was crisp and logged. Receipts anchor the approach. Public ML-perf inference results include tables that report latency and throughput across hardware and scenarios. They prove that deterministic workloads with fixed shapes hit higher throughput and lower variance than unbounded reasoning paths. A broadband measurement report, like FCC's Measuring Broadband America, includes figures on typical access latency that remind us the edge isn't magic. User networks impose floors we must work around, not argue with. On the energy side, the Electric Power Monthly provides monthly generation and price tables. The point is simple. Prices and mixes move across hours and months, and batch windows with cheaper, cleaner power are real. I cite these artifacts not to advertise, but to tie our scheduling and caching to something we can check. The human impact edge is where this either lands or fails. A field technician at the edge of coverage needs an agent that returns a cached fix flow instantly, then streams any retrieved details. A high school counselor writing a family email needs a plan that's on policy and transparent about sources. They don't have time for a clever flourish that risks misstatement. A small city office that runs on old hardware needs sub-second responses on warmed paths, or they drop the tool after a week. Access is not a press claim. It is whether the system respects their reality. There's a contrarian line worth stating. Caches and plan registries are not bureaucratic overhead. They are the way we democratize capability by making it cheap and predictable. The mainstream view says, let the model figure it out each time. We tested the opposite and wrote it down. A pre-validated plan registry with provenance lowered error rates because we removed improvisation in boring spots. A compact cache of safe subplans compressed warm latencies without touching refusal integrity. The document backing this is prosaic, an internal reliability dashboard that shows P95 flattening after the registry shipped, and a change log that ties the effect to a dated rollout. The implication is durable. Predictable beats clever at scale. Two recommendations fall out cleanly. For platform teams, stand up a public plan registry with typed schemas, provenance hashes, and expiries. Enforce that all production agents call plans by ID, not by free-form description. Make it a two-sprint objective and assign an owner for vetting and rotation. For finance and infrastructure, align scheduled heavy workloads, plan validations, library linting, large re-evals, with lower cost, lower carbon windows indicated in utility price tables, and report the savings next quarter. That's unit economics meeting governance in the open. I've kept distribution in the frame because adoption is not only price, it's also the first 5 minutes. Developers will try a system once and decide if it's worth time. If the first call is fast and accurate with a clear refusal when appropriate, they keep building. If it's slow and improvisational, they churn. Execution dominance emerges from thousands of those micro-judgments. We win each iteration by keeping promises in those minutes and by making the system's refusal posture legible and consistent. Scaling this without starving safety means we push complexity to compile time, pre-compute embeddings, pre-validate plans, pre-generate deterministic scaffolds, tie everything to versioned IDs with diffs, then keep the hot path thin, retrieve, fill, verify. When a novel task arrives, we route to a safe, slow path with a banner that explains the delay or the refusal. We never hide the cost from the user. We tell them what is happening and why, and we keep their time sacred. Bottom line for this part: structured tool use and cash discipline are not nice-to-haves. They are the levers that lower cost and raise trust simultaneously. If we fail to industrialize them, we will burn budget on improvisation and force hard trade-offs between speed and safety. If we do them well, we widen access, stabilize performance, and make reform a real option instead of a slogan. We carry the pressure forward. Next, we close the loop with governance, incentives, and public credibility so we can ship faster without losing the plot. We lock governance to incentives and credibility, then close with near-term moves and one long-term guardrail tied to real constraints. I'm turning to closure now because the questions are no longer technical alone. They're about whether we can align cost, energy, safety, and trust tightly enough to avoid a slow breakdown while we ship useful reform. I'll use energy and infrastructure transitions as the through line. Every compute plateau in the past was unlocked by physical investment and smarter scheduling, not slogans. We are running systems that translate electricity into reasoning in real time. The constraint is not only accelerators, it is where the power comes from, when it's cheap and clean, and how we budget it, so safety doesn't get cut when margins narrow. The basic argument is that we earn public credibility by treating energy, safety, and governance as co-equal product surfaces. Here is why. Users trust systems that keep promises under stress. Investors back systems whose costs don't jump at the first shock. Regulators judge systems by whether controls work on bad days, not only in demos. Two mechanisms finish the arc: compute energy scheduling and safety governance incentives. Compute energy scheduling means assigning heavy jobs to the hours and nodes that can carry them without starving interactive workloads. It also means pre-computing what we can and proving that our caches are signed and fresh. Safety governance incentives means paying teams in time and budget for holding the refusal line, wiring approvals to identities, and logging changes so we can show our work when we make mistakes. Neither mechanism helps alone. Together, they let us ship faster without losing the plot. The first vignette is a document processing pipeline that converts piles of PDFs into structured records for small businesses. It used to run ingestion, OCR, and interpretation on demand. Latency was fine at low scale, but cost spiked in bursts and monitors fell behind during peaks. We inverted the architecture. OCR and layout extraction run in batch windows aligned with predictable energy dips. Interpretation pulls from a pre-signed feature store with expiry and provenance hashes. Safety checks for PII redaction move to a compact classifier in the hot path, with a heavier auditor running in the batch window. The public artifact that guided this was the utility's monthly generation table, enough variation across hours to justify the change. Outcome: stable interactive latency, lower variance in unit cost, and fewer safety backlogs when traffic jumped. Second vignette, a civic information agent that summarizes meeting agendas and draft rules for residents. The risk wasn't accuracy of quotes, it was attributing policy effects that exceeded the text. We tied the agent to a policy as code layer with versioned retrieval sources and forced inline citations by paragraph. We then aligned rollouts to a change control cadence that matched the city's own publication cycle. A standards document on lifecycle risk treatment gave us the language to separate observed from inferred and to audit both. Adoption grew because refusals were consistent and traceable, and because the agent was honest about what it didn't know. Third vignette, a multilingual micro-entrepreneur assistant that helps a one-person shop write invoices, track inventory basics, and send payment reminders. The model used to freestyle responses. Now it calls pre-validated plans that hit a tiny accounting kernel and a translation module with a budget gate on time to first response. Caching keeps common templates warm. The human impact was visible. Late-night responses that felt instant, fewer missent reminders, and no surprise charges. When the translation module updated and briefly drifted, our policy diff and rollback brought it back in minutes, not days. The trust came not from perfection, but from a clear chain of custody over changes. Receipts keep us disciplined. An operator need not love energy data to accept that a monthly electricity table lists the changing mix and implied price contours. Aligning batch to those windows is testable. A reliability guide reminds us that change management controls, who approved what when, are not paperwork. They are the only way to show why a refusal behavior shifted last Tuesday. A risk framework section on measurement and monitoring tells us to treat post-deploy metrics as a first-class artifact, not a slide footnote. These documents are dull in the best way. They are tools we can hand to new teammates and to external reviewers without drama. I'm conscious of the wider frame implied by the title. Inequality creates demand for tools that lower the price of productivity. Polarization without trust means refusals, and citations matter more than charisma. Waning global credibility means we have to build systems that are legible and stable across jurisdictions. A parent working two jobs doesn't care whether we did a clever prompt trick. They care that the rent reminder template sends on time, in the right language, with the right amount, and never guesses. A small clinic doesn't want a miracle. It wants guaranteed scope and fast decline on anything clinical. A rural library with spotty bandwidth needs warmed responses that respect the network floor. If we meet these realities, we make reform possible in practice. Fewer hours lost to bureaucracy, more confidence in basic services, and software that does not break when the news cycle spikes. There's one contrarian line I keep repeating internally. Public credibility is cheaper than crisis. People assume transparency slows us down. My experience is the opposite. When we publish a short reliability note, what failed, why, what changed, with artifact IDs, we reduce support load and increase developer trust. We test this against the record by watching support tickets fall after release notes that include policy diffs and monitor thresholds. That is the cost curve bending in the right direction. We are asked to choose reform or breakdown. Inside the product, reform is a set of habits. Near-term move 1, shift 30% of heavy evaluation and plan validation workloads into energy-favorable batch windows and publish the before-after unit cost and monitor coverage numbers next quarter. The owner is infrastructure. The instrument is a scheduler that reads a known price signal. The horizon is 1 quarter. Near-term move 2, implement organization-wide policy as code with signed diffs and progressive rollouts, wire incident auto-rollback to a numeric safety KPI, and require post-incident public notes that cite the changed artifacts. The owner is platform governance. The instrument is approvals tied to identity and percentage rollouts. The horizon is 2 sprints. These moves translate values into traceable practice. The long-term guardrail is simple and hard. Keep refusal integrity and provenance non-negotiable in the budget. We enshrine a rule that no cost or latency squeeze may reduce coverage on named safety monitors or remove inline provenance. When budgets tighten, we cut cosmetics, not safeguards. We move work to different hours or rewrite plans, but we don't take the safety battery out of the smoke detector. The instrument is a board-level policy that treats refusal and provenance as availability targets with quarterly audits that sample real traffic and reproduce failures. That's how we keep ourselves honest when pressure rises. I close by pulling the threads together. Capability growth is real, but the returns now come from loop design. Evaluation coverage before launch, monitors after, typed plans and caches in the hot path, energy-aware scheduling beneath, and governance that rewards the people who hold the line. The decision space shrinks when we do this. We stop arguing abstractions and start comparing artifacts. The choice between reform and breakdown becomes a daily practice of shipping safe, reliable increments that compound. Bottom line, the balance we can hold today allows broader automation in everyday work without raising systemic risk, provided we budget energy, treat safety as a live metric, and make governance visible. It forbids improvisation in hot paths and silent policy changes. It leaves uncertain the shape of the next model jump and the pace of infrastructure build-out, but our loop will absorb either if we keep it disciplined. Thank you for staying focused. We keep shipping safely and keep listening.